Now, I'm here in Guelph at the lovely Red Brick Cafe. How about a hand for the Red Brick Cafe? We're going to be talking about why the environment is important to you. We are streaming this conversation on CBC's Facebook and Twitter pages all across the province. And we want you at home to join in the conversation. You can share your thoughts with us in the comments section. We will put them through to our panels. And I want to introduce our panel right now. Joining me on my far left is Tamana Kohi. She is on the board of the Wellington Water Watchers, and she works with RARE. That's a charitable research reserve in Cambridge. In the center is Mr. Evan Ferrari. He's the executive director of Emerge Guelph. That is a local, and he's a local environmental consultant. And beside me is Yvette Tendick. She is the president and co-founder of the Coalition for Active Transportation. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you. So we will be, we're not etched in stone here. This is going to be a very cool, laid-back kind of thing, just so everyone knows. You have a question and you're here in I was going to say our studio audience. You're in our cafe audience, our salon, we'll call it. If you're here in our cafe audience and you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, feel free to make Victoria aware of that at the back of the room, and she will bring a microphone to you so you can be mic'd. So we're going to kick off here with the obvious question. And we will start with Tamana. Why should the environment be an election issue?
Well, I think you should think about it. When you wake up in the morning, what's one of the first things you do? You go to the bathroom, you turn on the tap. You're in a relationship with the environment on a day-to-day basis, and to just exclude it from your life, something that you're inextricably linked to and depend on for survival is extremely important. And everything that you do, everything that you put in your body, that you consume, it all depends on nature and the environment. And to just exclude that from the election, I think, would be a little bit crazy.
Evan?
What she said. I mean, Tamana did a wonderful job of it. The environment affects everything around us, and I don't think I can put it any more eloquently than her. But frankly, why it isn't an election issue from my perspective is that it's complex. It's not a 10-second soundbite, and that's what we've been expecting of our politicians, and we seem to reward them when they come out with 10-second soundbites. And meanwhile, with the environment, all the issues related to the environment are so complex that we can't boil it down, or if we do, we completely obliterate any of the messaging that we're trying to get out there.
Yvette, do you think that we expect too much of our candidates then?
Oh, I don't know about that, but talking about boiling down the issues, for me, I am going to boil it down because I have a kind of a specific interest in environmental issues related to transportation. So tonight I'm going to be talking about that.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think the environment's an important topic?
Well, one of the important topics through the transportation lens is how we get around every day, because that is one of the ways that is super important related to greenhouse gases and just general pollution of our environment. So in the cities in particular, we would be much better off if we begin to reduce auto use. And one of the ways that we can do that is start to build our roads and our trails in a way that we can get around without necessarily having to use an auto.
And so, do you think that's an election issue?
I think that, yeah, sure, it's an election issue. It's important that we offer transportation alternatives because we need to be able to, it impacts everything in city life to be able, how we get around.
That's, like, transportation is a big one. But what do you, and I'll throw this out to whomever now, I mean, what are some of the biggest issues environmentally that are impacting us right now?
I would just throw climate change out there as the biggest one. 2/3 of the population believe that climate change is an issue and that we need to be doing something about it. And needless to say, there will always be the deniers. There will always be those that are trying to cast aspersions on it and obfuscate and mess up everything that's going on with it. But we're finally at a point where we're actually making some progress on climate change after 30, 40 years of it in this cyclical nature of politics where it gets some attention and then it dissipates for a while. But we're finally there. We actually have a price on carbon. And it's pervasive. Climate change is pervasive. Everything from transportation to rare and biodiversity and everything in between. That again, it's one of those complex issues that doesn't boil down to that 10-second soundbite, but it's critical and people are expecting something from it. But for some reason, we seem to, as an electorate, be willing to listen to 10-second sound bites instead of understanding that these are complex things that we're going to have to work on.
We have, sticking with transportation, we have a question from Twitter. I love Twitter handles. Old Squiddy asks, how do we get away from gas vehicles when most millennials are too broke to buy new electric cars, even with the rebates? And that just doesn't go just to transportation. We can, but I mean, even if you want to buy environmentally friendly things at the grocery store, everything costs more. So talk a bit about that. How do we make those more affordable?
If I could jump in on that one, but to always preface it by saying if we can get people out of motorized transportation and getting them doing the active transportation that Yvette always promotes, that's first on the table. On that end of it, about the affordability, the interesting thing that's happening on affordability with electric vehicles and self-driving vehicles is that there's a whole industry that all of the major car manufacturers in the world and the Ubers of the world, a lot of disruptive technologies of the world are racing towards going to that automated system, because currently the average personal vehicle stays still for 96% of the time. So it's only utilized 4% of the time. With automated, intelligent automobiles, self-driving automobiles, we could increase that to 40%. But what these disruptive companies are going after, getting to the question, Craig, is that the cost of traveling the same amount of distance that you could be going today could be about a quarter of what you'd be spending today by owning a car. So conceivably, those millennials will never own a car. And their parents may come a time when they're never owning a car because of the self-driving vehicles that are also electric with a much higher utilization rate. And then all of a sudden, because these cars are almost constantly in motion, we need less parking. We have more land for productive use instead of stupid parking all over the place. Also, from a biodiversity standpoint, we have more land available on that end of it. I'm kind of optimistic at this point where that technology is going. I don't want to always put all of my my eggs in the technology basket, but I think that horizon within 3 to 4 years, we're going to see some really exciting things happening there.
Eric Zubert from Sudbury is on Facebook, watching on Facebook. Hey, Eric. The environment is an important issue to me, he says, because it's going to be an important issue for my children. I mean, how much do we need to start really thinking about that too, Tamani?
I think that now is the time. Now is definitely the time to be thinking not only about yourself, about the next generation, but 7 generations from now. What's going to be happening in the future? One of the environmental issues that stands out to me is water. Not only the pollution of water, but water taking, especially in Guelph and Wellington counties, the multinational corporations that extract water. And so many years ago, there were glaciers in this area, and when they receded, they left aquifers, and water is trickled down from precipitation, and we here in Guelph have some of the best water in the world, and we are definitely blessed with that. And to be able to give that to future generations, to be able to say that we protected water for them, is definitely a huge legacy to leave behind. So I'd say that it's extremely important, because without water, there's no life.
Yeah. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Think of the children?
Well, I was thinking of the children. I'm a school teacher, and I think of the children every day. And I think of how, for example, they move around the city, and it's always in their parents' car or maybe the school bus, but they have very limited freedom. And also, you were talking about millennials. Well, with the price of homes and all that, they really don't have the money necessarily to be able to afford their own private car. So we really do need to provide some transportation alternatives that make them healthy, good for mental health, and all that kind of thing.
But kids, I think the next generation, kids have it going on, right? They know more than we do, don't they, don't you think?
Some ways yes, some ways no, I suppose.
But I mean, I think they're a lot more, like I just think about my own child, and I think about how environmentally conscious that they are.
Yeah.
And I think that, let's talk about solutions, because all 3 of you work in the solutions biz when it comes to, environmental problems. What are some of the solutions for fixing the environment that you're working on? Let's start with Yvette.
Well, we're working on, first of all, getting cities to have better cycling networks, for example, and better active transportation networks so that there's better connections so people feel safe when they're riding their bikes. Because right now, a lot of people would like to ride their bikes to work, to shops and things like that, but they don't feel safe. So that's what we need to do right now. We need to have kind of separated cycling infrastructure so that people feel safe when they're riding their bikes.
That is a main concern. Just a show, or by applause or show of hands, who here rides bikes? Yeah? Ooh. How many of you don't ride bikes enough because you don't feel safe on certain streets? Yeah. That's true. It's a common,
common theme. Eh?
Yeah, it's a theme that we hear a lot. Evan, what are you working on?
What we're working on is trying to change that 10-second soundbite I talked about earlier, from the standpoint that we've been working on climate change, and having that discussion has always been problematic. So what we've done is we tested messaging around working on a project to get Guelph to a point where it's 100% renewable energy, where the city is powered by 100% renewable energy by 2050. We just got City Council to agree to it, and we're pretty excited about that. So the corporation, the corporation of the City of Guelph, this isn't the entire community, the corporation of the City of Guelph has that. The rest of the community is next, absolutely. There are 1,000 communities around the world that have already committed to it. Some have actually achieved it. There's a lot of work that has to go into that. I could probably spend all night, and I won't, talking about the different compelling pieces of that. But we wanted to take what had become a really dysfunctional discourse around climate change and turn it into something positive, that someone could understand, at least have some kind of an idea of what that was going to look like. And we came up with that concept. And all the different pieces, whether it's dealing with biodiversity, whether it's dealing with transportation or the energy we use in our house, we can all fit it under that 100% renewable handle.
I mean, with RARE and with Wellington Water Watchers, talk a bit about that.
First, I just want to frame the fixing the environment part. That's pretty loaded, and I don't know if necessarily there's this one be-all end-all solution, but I think being in relationship with the environment and learning about the environment is definitely a huge effort in itself. But with Wellington Water Watchers specifically, we have a campaign that is Say No to Nestle and Water for Life nonprofit. And we have 4 simple requests from the provincial government, no matter who is in party. And one is to phase out water bottling permits within 10 years. The other one is to say no to Nestle in Wellington County. Another is to respect the duty to consult Indigenous peoples, local Indigenous communities. There is a permit that Nestle has applied for to extract water from Middlebrook, which actually sits on 6 nations of the Grand River Territory. And then the 4th is to promote the fact that water should be a public good. It should be accessed by all, and potable water should be accessible for everybody. So.
And there are many places in this province where they don't have drinking water.
Exactly.
Which is a stunning comment to make. On YouTube, Michael Stewart is watching on YouTube. This is interesting, and this is something that has been discussed before, but it's an interesting point. Transit needs to be made at no cost to the end user. Ridership would increase. What do you think of that?
I've heard there's some places where they now have free ridership. I need to know more about it, but it certainly sounds good.
Yeah. Evan, as a former commuter.
I've talked to a number of politicians about this, even local ones, where some of them feel that our local transit system is so messed up, why would we put any money into it? And what I did was I turned the question around and I challenged them to say, what if we had a transit system that was so fantastic that people would be elbowing each other to get on the bus because it was such a pleasant experience? Instead of trying to figure out how much money can we suck out of this and send somewhere else, or what's the absolute minimal amount of money that could be associated with it, because only marginalized communities are using it, or this is a perception that's out there. What if we turn that around and said, how could we make it fantastic? Is it with free? Is it with free? With free bus passes, or is it just marginalized people would have those free bus passes? Is it internet within it? I don't know what that would mean. But imagine going to the public and having charrettes and trying to get an understanding of what that would be. Many people travel all over the world and say they've gone to, I don't know, different places in Europe and are absolutely blown away with the public transit system. Well, why couldn't we vision that way here, as opposed to saying we need to fight to get more buses on Route 3 in Guelph or whatever other community? Instead, how do we make it fantastic? How do we make people want to use it? And I think that's a much different question than just saying make it cheap and everyone will use it. Well, if it's not working for them, even if it's cheap, they won't use it.
Well, exactly, but it is a chicken and egg conversation. You want better transportation, and if it were better, more people would use it, but you can't have more unless people, the critical mass is there using it. And that's a conundrum that I think is tough to
It would take real vision, and usually politicians lead, they don't follow. They follow, they don't lead. When they know that the populace is ready for something, that's when they're willing to jump on board with it.
Let's talk about politicians. I don't know how many people know we're in the middle of a provincial election. I guess that's why we're doing this. I thought this was just make work for Craig. We're going to talk about, some parties have said more about the environment than other parties. Let's say a government is elected who doesn't have the environment top of mind. How do we work with them?
With difficulty.
With difficulty, she said, quietly. What can we do? Nothing?
Well,
that seems to be.
No, actually, I'm a little more emboldened after what happened politically south of the border. What's happened in the United States is that the subnational or the individual states and municipalities have embraced fighting climate change in those communities, and they say they don't care what that other political entity is saying that you can and can't do. They're going to go ahead and do it anyways. And frankly, in Guelph, we've got some momentum on environmental issues right now. So if we don't have support, for environmental issues provincially, there's no reason why we can't move ahead on that. And the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, sees municipalities at a key. The key delivery mechanism for mitigating and for stopping climate change and improving the environment. So, yeah, it wouldn't be good, Craig, but damn it, we have to keep going on this. And I think we've got a kernel of something locally, and we need to just keep driving that home.
Well, you can tone down the language, but
no, definitely not.
But that's also how the states is sort of attacking it as well. I mean, there are states like California, Jerry Brown in California. There are cities that are taking it upon themselves. What about you, Tamani? How would you deal with a government that maybe is less sympathetic to the environment?
I think with a lot of passion. Wellington Water Watchers recently did a poll with some of us, and we did a poll, and the results were that over 60% of participants, no matter what political affiliation they were with, were against or were for actually phasing out permits for water bottling. And so I think that no matter who you are, if you're with PC or if you're green, we all kind of are united by this kind of the mother lode of issues that tie us together, which is water, right? So I think that if we just keep going with the campaigns, and I think that the election's definitely going to give us some momentum and some more passion, no matter what the outcome, good or bad. There's always a silver lining, and so I think that we're just going to keep pushing on with our campaigns. We already have a lot of leverage. When it comes to water, how does Evan's idea of more municipal government input, does that work for water as well, or is that more of a provincial purview? I guess it depends, because when you're looking at big corporations, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change is usually the one that deals with them directly and not necessarily the municipality. Mm-hmm. But I think that the municipal governments speaking up and supporting the public and responding to statements or letters that they get from citizens of each municipality is very important, to just listen to the public voice. Just a reminder for anyone out there watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter,
We want to hear your questions out there. So if you have a question, put it in the comments or tweet it at us. And Hayden Waters is crouched over a computer over here. He will get it to us. So please take part. And if anyone in the room wants to ask a question, feel free. Victoria has the microphone back there. She will come to you, and you can ask the question in the cafe as well. Speaking of questions from people watching, Mark Drew from London asks on Facebook, how do we balance environmental protection and preservation with modern development and resource management? It's the idea that, what sort of sacrifices are we going to have to make, I guess, is the end result of this. How do we do this? How do we
Well, in the case of
this?
what I'm kind of focused on, transportation, I don't think that it actually is any kind of sacrifice. I think it's the opposite of sacrifice. Because if you have opportunities for people to get around, for example, without necessarily having to have a car, alternate forms of transportation, at that point you need to have a different type of city where you might have mixed use development, where people are able to access amenities quite easily. And that promotes city building, and actually a much nicer, inviting city than the old-fashioned style city that was car dependent, where there was large parking lots and 4-lane roads through downtowns and things like that. So it's actually a plus to be able to deal with some of these environmental issues. It makes things better.
Tamati?
I think that we have so many solutions coming left, right, and center from universities, from so many intelligent youth and people that are just working on coming up with sustainable solutions for various environmental concerns that we face today. And I think it's just a matter of implementing that and getting through the loopholes of legislation to just really try and implement those. We have the solutions, and they're definitely, we won't be losing anything by making things more sustainable at all. We'll only be gaining.
You used the dreaded B word in my mind, Craig, balance. And frankly, we haven't had balance for 200 years in development, and we're just barely getting to that point at this point. So frankly, I think we need to be a lot more aggressive about making sure that we need to be looking at that balance in a true method, as opposed to saying we just need more development, as opposed to truly understanding the impacts that development is going to have on the environment, and how do we enhance the environment? Not about how do we mitigate the bad things that building this building is going to cause, but how do we enhance the environment around that as a result of that building? It's a very different approach. So the dreaded B word just doesn't sit well with me, because we haven't done a good job of it for a long time, and now we need to start reversing that.
So R word instead, reverse. Is that what you're saying?
Think better. Yeah.
We have a question in the audience, yes. What's your name, sir?
My name's Leon. I'm from Guelph around here. I was wondering, you can ask the panelists, so nuclear energy is an interesting spot where it's not as pollutive as a lot of the traditional fossil fuels, but it's also not a renewable energy resource. And recently in the election platforms, the Green Party in particular has said they're not going to move towards renewing, like they won't update the plants or whatever, they'll phase them out, that sort of thing. They won't put any more money into it. I was wondering what the panelists think the future of nuclear energy in Canada and in our province looks like.
I think it looks really bleak. It looks really bleak in Ontario for, and as someone that's completely passionate about the environment, I could talk about the negative environmental impacts forever, but let me just talk about the economics. The economics are killing nuclear everywhere in the world. The largest manufacturers of nuclear reactors around the world are all out of the business. The only companies that are still operating are those that are owned by governments, namely in China, in France, and in Canada. Because no company in their right mind would want to continue building new nuclear plants. Number one, because of the liability. Number two, no one can truly tell you how much it's going to cost at the end of the day. Everywhere, the costs continue to rise, and the cost of renewables and conservation and efficiency continue to drop in the other direction. I'm thankful that finally economics is going to trump the nuclear end of things, and I think we need to accelerate the phase out of the nuclear reactors in Ontario, specifically Pickering to start with, and then slowly phasing out the others. And what's more, what we can do in Ontario is that we can become experts at decommissioning nuclear plants, and we can make money on that and export that technology to other places. So I don't necessarily think it's only a negative thing of it closing. And that means that's work for decades from
Sheila White on Twitter asks, why no Ontario action plan on litter prevention? Someone want to jump on that?
I don't know specifically about litter prevention, but I know that people very active, not myself, but people very active in the field of waste management have been pushing something that they call, I hope I have the acronym right, Extended Producer Responsibility. I think that's what it's called, EPR. And essentially what that says is that if I manufacture this glass, I have to be responsible for it, not only from the climate change gases that it creates in the process of manufacturing it, but from cradle, not cradle to grave, but cradle to cradle. So that when I manufacture that, I have to have in mind, how do I re-engineer that out the other end so that there's something usable out the other side of it? So that includes packaging, it includes everything else. It's about rethinking the way that we do things. And I don't think the province is there yet. I'm not up to speed on that policy side of it, Craig, but I know that that's where the movement around waste management is going, is extended producer responsibility. And as consumers, we're going to need to pay for that. We might have to pay a little more money for that thing, but imagine that now we've got a cradle-to-cradle product that we're all going to benefit from in the end.
How do you think you sell that? How do you think you sell that to people, that you'll have to pay more for something, but it's better for the environment?
They might have to think about their kids, for one thing. I definitely think that is a very good question, and we definitely need to work towards that in policy. But just for example, with water bottles, single-use water bottles, there are so many used every day, and only about I think 30-something% don't make it to landfills, and they end up in our oceans. I'm sure you've seen on viral videos of water bottles in the ocean, and our animals are eating them, and plastics, they don't just go away. They stay in the environment for years beyond our lifetimes. And so I think that we definitely need to move to that stage. But as for how to convince someone to pay for it, I think they really just need to look into themselves and reconnect with who they are, to value themselves, to value the environment.
Go ahead.
Also, there's a bit of a cost to not doing this now, because other countries aren't taking our recyclables anymore. So now we have to deal with it. So we have the extra cost of dealing with our own recyclables. So the cradle to cradle eliminates that cost.
How much of a victory, and I mean, victory, you probably don't like that word either, Evan, but how much of a victory is it? I mean, when you think about how foreign it is now to see people use plastic shopping bags. Like that happened, in my mind, that happened really quickly, that we stopped using plastic bags. Because they charged, what, a dime or a nickel for plastic bags, right? So maybe that's what we have to start doing, right?
Yeah.
Charging for bed. I'm just throwing that out there. Not really. I'm thinking out loud now. We're not still on, are we? We have an audience question. Yes, Ian.
We do. Thank
What
you.
is your name, sir?
Ian Findlay. I'm from Guelph here. So Guelph at one time was had a real leadership role in environmental stewardship, and this election campaign seems to really be focused on fear. I don't want this person, so I'm going to vote for this person. Or I don't want that person, so I'm going to vote for this person. How do we change the channel here in Guelph to really get environmental issues back on the forefront of people's minds? How do we show national leadership in environmental leadership, and not this politics of fear continually? I don't want this person, so I'm going to vote for that person. But you're not really voting for what you want. How do we change the narrative to get people voting for what they really want, as opposed to, I don't want that person, so I'm going to hold my nose and vote for this person?
If I could try this one, I think it's about finding small successes that everyone can feel part of. It's going to sound kind of touchy-feely, Craig. Don't get too excited here.
I'm not. I don't have a heart of stone.
But
just don't cuss.
I don't cuss. I think back of the coal phase-out. The current government implemented it, but at the end of the day, there was all-party support for that. And I think that, frankly, we need to find more things that we can get all-party supported. Now, granted, that takes a great deal of work. And the coal phase-out didn't start from the top. It started with community organizing from communities all across the province. And at the end, that was an interesting one, because originally it was a stop burning fossil fuels because of greenhouse gas emissions. And eventually, the grassroots groups turned that around to a health issue. There were huge issues related to, health issues related to asthma in and around the Lakeview generating station in the south end of, as you went down the 427 in Toronto, you could see those 4 stacks on a cold day or a really hot day. They would just be billowing that coal out there. But it wasn't until we put it in terms that people could understand and that people were seeing the impacts of their children having asthma, and it took Hurricane Hazel McCallion to understand that this was a real issue for her constituents, that it was a turning point. So I think that part of that is on us as people in the environmental community, is figuring out the right messaging around it. It was important before they were able to point out that there were health implications to it for strictly greenhouse gas emission sides of it. So maybe we need to do a better job of communicating those pieces, but leveraging those small wins where we have everybody at the table, like the 100% renewable. It was unanimously supported in Guelph by everyone around the horseshoe. And I think celebrating those things, because inevitably what happens is we get something done and we have to move on to the 12 other things that we're attempting to do at the same time, as opposed to saying, let's celebrate this. You get people from different political persuasions working together on something and doing something positive. Let's leverage that. Let's continue to build a positive movement.
I think to add on to that, I agree, when you do break things down into more digestible pieces, I guess, for people to consider, when you think about water, for example, and what we've been doing in the Water for Life nonprofit and Say No to Nestle campaign, we've already made some progress in adding on some political pressure, and the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change has raised the price for permits to extract water from $3.71 to $503.71 per liter. And I think to just frame it in the sense that we really have an opportunity right now to make Ontario a leader and a hero for water and the public right of water. We want to be able to save water for future generations to come, and to be able to do that, we really have to change the legislation. So being able to frame it as an opportunity for change in the future, no matter what happens. Like I mentioned before, over 60% of people that contributed to our Some of Us survey agree that water bottles or the bottling of water should be phased out in 10 years. So I think breaking it down like that with our successes and moving forward and framing it as an opportunity is a great place to start, just to think about the positives. That's cheesy, but it's true.
You don't have to qualify it. That's, we just have a little bit of time left, but I want to touch on some polls are suggesting, and it's sort of pick up on what Ian said, some polls are suggesting that Guelph could very well elect the first ever Green Party candidate. So what would that mean in the larger scheme of things, Yvette, if that were to happen?
Well, once again, from the perspective of active transportation. So the Greens are offering 5% of the transportation budget to go toward active transportation, to a total of $2.18 billion over 4 years. So they're really investing heavily because they realize the importance of giving people alternatives to car travel and the importance to the environment for it.
Evan?
I think it would begin to question our first past the post electoral system. That theoretically we have a multi-party system, but it's extremely difficult for a third or a fourth party to actually be in any position of power. And so number one, I think it brings that issue to the fore again. Whether it will get solved or not in this next legislature or not, I don't know. But secondly, what it would do is it would give a voice in the legislature that we haven't heard before, one that isn't tied to being whipped by the party. It would be very interesting to see what the impact of that would have, because now all of a sudden that there would be provincial media that would be at this person's beck and call because they'd be in the legislature all the time. I think it could have quite a. It's only one seat, and people are going to say, well, how on earth could that actually have an impact on? That's how it started in Europe. That's how it started in other places around the world, with getting to seriously question the first past the post system and an opportunity to broaden the number of parties that are involved with it. So I think it could be quite profound. Just one seat can be quite profound.
Tamani, you agree?
I do agree. Yeah, I think it would definitely bring in a new opportunity for additional voices to be heard that might not have been heard before or had a focus on before. So, yeah, I'd be curious as well.
Well, we are going to wrap it up. I want to give you guys a chance to just go through some final thoughts before you send us on our way. Yvette.
Well, thanks for having us here today.
Thank you.
And thanks for the opportunity to have a chance to speak. Yeah.
Evan?
Well, yes, absolutely. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. I find it interesting to see the interest in the environment here in Guelph, but I know that people are interested in it right around the province. So I'm excited to have been a part of it. Thank you.
Tamani, what would you like people to leave here with tonight?
I want you all to feel encouraged about the future, because no matter what the turnout is, it's all going to be okay. Just focus on what we need to work towards. It's not a U.S. situation. So I think just put your best foot forward in your vote. And when you walk out of that election place or wherever you're going to vote, just feel positive and get ready for the next day.
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you very much to our entire panel here. I want to say Tamani.
Tamana.
Evan, Tamana, sorry. I keep getting your last name and your first name mixed up. Okay. Tamana Coe, Evan Ferrari, and Yvette Tendrick. Thank you so much, all three of you, for joining us. I also want to thank the Red Brick Cafe for hosting us tonight. Thank you to our live audience here. Thank you very much. You can applaud yourselves too. Very humble. And thank you to everyone at home for watching and contributing to the conversation. CBC has you covered this election night. This Thursday, head to cbc.ca/Ontario votes to watch our special coverage of the results. I'm told that our Ontario reporter Mike Crawley told me that the results are going to be coming in very quickly on Thursday night, so because of the new balloting. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm Craig Norris. Have a great night. That was super awkward.
Awkward silence.
I was sweating.
You were.
You were amazing.